It's kind of hard following that kind of very well thought out, bullet pointed kind of approach to working from home and dealing with everything that we've been dealing with for the past year. And I took a slightly different approach in what I wanted to chat about today. Some of it is about the work from home balance, and another piece of it is in general. I mean, I know that we have a mix of male and female on here. It's great, but coming from it from a female perspective, some of the obstacles that we do need to overcome and the way that we deal with those obstacles, to me, is what's really critical. But from a work from home perspective, look, the country's finally starting to open up. We start to see more and more, good news out in the marketplace in terms of the vaccine rollout. We're starting to talk about getting back to our offices, but the work from home scenario isn't going to go away. I think that box has been opened up and it's not going to get shut anytime soon. And I'm a big proponent of that because I think that it does allow us to have a little bit more of a work-life balance than we had in the past, where, the 9 to 5, or in our industry, the 8 to 10 at night isn't really the way that the world is going to be moving forward. I think we're going to have some sort of a hybrid approach to it, but those boundaries are absolutely critical. The team that I work with, and we are extraordinarily close. We are Zooming with each other constantly, but we are trying to work through what those boundaries are. I do not set up any kind of Zoom meetings before 9 a.m. That is just I just refuse to do it. Even when I'm dealing with the UK, I'm trying to find it at no earlier than 9 a.m. in the morning, because what I'm trying to do is build that time in the morning for myself. I shower, I get dressed in the morning the way that I would if I was going into the office, but I take a 30 to 40-minute walk with my dogs every morning. I will not let that go, because that gives me a setup for my day. It keeps me moving. It keeps my mind clear. It's time that I'm spending with my own brain just to get myself motivated and move for the day. I do sit in front of my computer somewhere between 8:15 almost every day, if not a little earlier. But again, I'm not setting up calls. I will be available for the team if they need me for some one-on-one time, but I'm not setting up these big, gigantic Zoom meetings. It's absolutely critical that that time is spent organizing my day, kind of looking back over the day before to make sure that I've covered anything that I need to cover, to answer some emails that I may need to follow up on, or in some instances, just to pay a bill that I haven't gotten to because I've been so crazy during the day. But taking that time in the morning is absolutely critical for me to really get myself set up and moving forward. The other thing that I'm really a big proponent of is I think Irina mentioned it too. I'm forcing my team, I'm mandating the team that they have to take an hour as a break. I have them scheduled throughout my calendar as my focus hours. And sometimes it's a half hour, sometimes it's an hour, but it's sometime in the middle of the day where I will either take another walk if I have the opportunity, or focus on a specific task that I'm trying to get done. Because honestly, Zoom meeting after Zoom meeting after Teams meeting after Google Meets meeting is not the way for any of us to get actual work done. The critical piece of that, and making sure that it's mandated for your teams. Look, as a manager, if we don't set that precedent, it's really hard for our team members to expect them to be, we could tell them all we want about, hey, take that hour, take that half hour, take your vacation schedule. But if we're not doing it as senior members of the team, it doesn't give them that permission to do it. So we have to set that example. We have to make sure that we're living up to those types of standards to show them how to create those boundaries, how to create that work-life balance. It's absolutely critical. So that was my big thing coming into this year in 2021, saying, I am going to do this because if I do it, it gives my team permission to do it. And ultimately, that's going to make them, a much happier set of team members and productive members of just, getting things done for clients. It's really important for them to have that reset button. One of the jokes that, and unfortunately, it's not really very funny, but we're like, hey, yeah, we're having all of these Zoom meetings, and then we get to our second job at 6 p.m. at night. We can't do that. We have to try to find those things during the day to keep us moving, and then end at a reasonable time so that we're not just constantly bombarded. My mantra has always been like an always on mentality. I had to prove myself. I have to be on 100%. I have to answer an email as soon as it comes in. I have to look at my Teams meeting and answer people. And I'm starting to break down that barrier even within myself to make sure that I yes, I want to do a great job. We have a new relationship that I'm responsible for, and I take it very seriously. But if I don't create that kind of endpoint for myself, it's just, you're tired. You just can't function well. So I really am a big proponent of making sure that you take breaks throughout the day and have an endpoint for yourself at home. Don't always respond to an email 24/7. Let it wait. It's okay. You know, we as an industry need to let clients know it's okay to say, I'll get back to you tomorrow, or I'm not going to be able to get that to you at 3 p.m. today. I'm going to have to get it to you at 10 a.m. in the next morning because I just don't have the ability to get it done at this point. It's okay for us to say that. I think it's a really big point that all of us miss as we struggle through trying to create these boundaries for ourselves. I think the other thing that's really interesting, you know, from a different perspective, I've been in the industry a really long time. Before this, I was in the general media planning world, and I was at a point in my career where I had hit a very high point. I was an EVP director. And I was just at a point in my life where I had to look around and say, is this what I want to continue doing with myself? I don't regret any experience that I've ever had in my life, good or bad, because I'm using those experiences to morph and change and adapt to what's happening in the marketplace and to really set myself up for where I want to be. You know, I don't have this grandiose blueprint. I really don't. I sit there day by day, week by week to try to figure out what it is that I want to accomplish. But overall, my goal is always to do the next thing that gets me to the next point, to the next point. So I'm really interested in this workshop. But overall, I think that one of the things that really stands out for me is, you know, many years ago, I was at a point where I needed to determine, what do I want to do next? I've hit a very high point in my career. I was in a situation that was extraordinarily challenging, that really was a difficult piece to overcome. And I had to make a decision. Do I want to stay here or do I make a change? And it was a hard decision. And honestly, I was angry that I had to make that decision in my career. I had worked so hard, so many years to get to that point. Did I really have to sit there and back off and make a change when I worked so hard to achieve what I had achieved? And ultimately, yes, that's what I chose to do. I just chose to make a change in my career. I joined the world of out of home, and I haven't looked back since, because all of those experiences that I had in the general planning world and in running large groups and in running research teams and everything that I had learned was something that I was able to bring over into the out of home space and become highly successful at it. So I didn't regret anything now. Back then, like I said, it was a tough move, and I reached out to a lot of my network, which is another big point. We are all together in this, so reach out to each other and use each other to network and move forward. But using those experiences and using those successes that I'd had in the past and creating that library of achievements was really important in being able to take it and move into the out of home space and become successful in this piece. You knew that was going to happen, right? So the big piece now is I feel like I've had a very successful career in out of home. I've had my own consultancy that was extremely profitable, but now I'm at a place that values my experience, that values my achievements, and we're able to help grow this company into something that's going to be a powerhouse in the out of home industry in the US. And now I'm in a happy place again. So don't ever regret your experiences. Use them to push yourself forward, to show your achievements, and don't be afraid to talk about your achievements and showcase the things that you've done in your lifetime, whether it is professional or whether it is, you know, on a personal basis. Don't be afraid to talk well about yourself out in the marketplace, and to yourself, have the confidence to do that and use it to build your successes moving forward. So hopefully these past experiences are things that we're going to use to move forward, and Jenna's going to take us through the blueprint. I'm very excited to actually create one for myself because I've never physically done one. So this is going to be pretty interesting.
Well, I absolutely hope that it is for not only for you, Enza, but for everybody that we have here today. I am so thrilled and honored, as always, to get time with all of you. And based on what Irina and Enza, you both shared around things like saying no and making time for what matters, sketching out not only the life that you want, but how do you get people to help you in that process, setting boundaries. These are all of the things that we're going to be covering in the time that we have together and mapping out our blue sky blueprint. So with that, I am going to share my screen here. And just give me a thumbs up if everybody can see it. We all good? Okay, terrific. So as you know, when we focus on being as fearless as we can be at work and in life, we always look at these 5 fearless fundamentals: confidence, communication, control, connections, and courage. And today we're going to be using all of these skills in our time together. And for those of you who haven't been with us before, our approach for the We Do workshops is to share some insights, but mainly give you some inspiration to know that you can take action. And speaking of action, if you haven't done it already, in the chat, I have put 2 links in there. First, what you'd want to click on is the Blue Sky Blueprint. That's what we're going to be using throughout the time that we have together. I've also added a handout for what is called our confidence catalog. Now, towards the end of our time together, we're going to be talking about how quickly you can start getting a confidence catalog, so it'll help you achieve that blue sky that you map out today. But also, this is an exercise that you can go through to really start to get a sense of your personal brand story or your personal narrative that you can share and be confident in, and then use that over time. So in the time that we have together today, this is what we'll be focusing on. So what is a blue sky blueprint and how do you use it? How can you prioritize so that you can start to make that vision a reality and say no? Understanding some of the fears that may be holding you back, so that once you have that sense of where do you want to go and what do you want to do, what are those things that might get in the way and impede your growth or stop you from doing what it is that you want? And then finally, we'll talk about cataloging your achievements. So please also give me a thumbs up here or a little whoop whoop if everybody has had the ability to open up the Blue Sky Blueprint. I see Blake giving me his thumbs up. Okay, great. If you haven't done it yet, you can just open that up and have it in another window for a little bit here. And you could even just be looking at that rather than looking at my face right now. But so this is what we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about, and how do you actually use this? So this is not something that will be completed not only in the time that we have together, but probably not even in the next few days or weeks or months. It should be a living, organic, breathing document that you use as a guide. And quite frankly, for me, when I first developed this, it was because I was deciding, similar to what Enza was sharing, that I was making a bit of a shift in life. And I wasn't even making a major career change, but I knew that where I wasn't making me happy. And I just got to this point of saying, well, why aren't I fulfilled? I'm successful. I'm a vice president of a great company and I make good money and I have a healthy family, and I just needed to really stop and create a guide for me to say, well, what is it that I want more of? What is it that I want less of? And then how am I going to actually create a plan to make that a reality? And for me, I then was deciding on which job I was going to go to next after I took that initial understanding of what was in my blue sky blueprint. Then I could articulate that to other people to say, here's what's important for me. In my next role, I want to be doing ba, 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 ba. And in those conversations, I was not necessarily saying to them, and I don't want to do X, but I was making it entirely clear what I valued. And that got me to a point where I was then deciding between 2 jobs. And for me, I actually used, again, an earlier generation of this blueprint. And one of the things that I had in my version was in the second section. So I'll come back to that in a second. As you can see, this is broken out to career. So what are those roles and responsibilities and what's important to you as it relates to your career? And career can mean anything from your professional job, if you work for a company in the digital out of home industry, or for anyone else that we have potentially joining us from any agency partners or even brands that might be here. But we also probably have many entrepreneurs. I saw that there were some small business owners who were on here as well. So what is it that you are actually doing? And then some of the other pieces of that, such as, do you want to take on that next step in your life and become an advisor or join a board of directors? Or do you have a vision for that in the future? There's an amazing woman, Matrice Ellis Kirk, who works with trying to get women on boards. And one of the things that she had said at a professional women's leadership summit that we did is that the biggest mistake women make is they think that they are not ready to join a board until they're in their 60s or 70s. And the reality is it's a path that you should be starting in your 30s. And so, as you'll see here, many times that's because if you're successful in your role, so I think of somebody like an Irina, you want to start off with potentially starting with a nonprofit board seat where you're helping a nonprofit for an organization that you're really passionate about. For those of you who have been to these programs in the past, you know, I talk a lot about ikigai, which is finding that confluence of what do you love, what are you good at, what will people pay you for, and what does the world need? Well, when you look at that confluence of those four things, that may be the perfect place to say, I want to accept a board role for, I don't know, maybe the DPAA We Do Advisory Board. Or if you are really passionate about rescuing pets or helping homeless youth, you may say, I've raised money for the Covenant House of New Jersey to help homeless teens, and now I want to join their board to help them be more successful. So in many cases, that's the first path. And then with time, you'll be able to use that experience to help you get a for-profit board role. And I am spending a little time on this because this is We Do, and we have a lot of successful women who are on today's, here with all of us today, who may not have been thinking about this yet. But so that's an example of something in your career, or it may be that entrepreneurial side hustle of something that you might not be ready to make a career change now, but you have a vision of what you want to be doing in 5 years or 10 years, or it may not even be what you ever want to leave your primary job for, but it could be something that you're really passionate and want to do on the side. So that's something that you can keep in mind. So you've got that career section. Then you have the work-life integration section. So these are those things that it's not necessarily related to your function or the roles and responsibilities that you have at work, but it's actually getting to those other things that might be really important when it comes to your personal happiness and life and job satisfaction. So things like company culture. Many times we don't spend enough time actually saying, what kind of a company do I want to be at? Am I somebody that I am so passionate about what I do and I want to roll up my sleeves and I want to be a part of a small startup and build something? Or I don't want that. And I really want the ability to be part of a large organization where there's a lot of process and support and resources that are all in place. And I can be a very important part of that corporate culture, but I don't ever want to be responsible for, weekend calls with the CEO or the COO because we're doing X, Y, and Z, and we're a 5-person organization or a 20-person organization. You also want to look at some of those other things, especially because this is for We Do, Women's Empowerment in Digital Out of Home, is to think about things like flexibility and location and travel requirements and commute and your PTO. Because while Enza had mentioned that right now we're all working from home, a lot of that will probably stay in place, but a lot of it won't, depending upon the nature of the kind of company that you work for. There are many companies that can't wait to be all together back in the office 5 days a week. And this is the time to start really thinking about, well, what do you want? And so then how can you communicate that and be very clear about what your boundaries are for the future? I'm thinking about that myself right now. I'm working from home 5 days a week. Am I going to want to go back to commute into New York City 5 days a week? Probably not. And so what I need to do is to establish what are the boundaries that I'll set for myself. Is it 2 days a week? Is it 3 days a week? How will I communicate that? Who will I communicate it to? In what order? So that there is no surprises. And so these are the kinds of things you want to start to map out. And then finally, that last section that you see there is what I like to bucket as home and you. So this is the area that, especially for us as women, we leave out all the time, right? This is the last thing that never gets a calendar appointment that goes onto your schedule. It's things like, what kind of relationship do you want with your spouse or your partner or your boyfriend or your girlfriend? Where is that not working? And what do you want more of? And what do you want less of? Things like all of the household duties and responsibilities that right now you're probably feeling even more than ever, because many of the things that we used to, outsource, whether that was maybe you had a cleaning person that would come in and clean your apartment or your house once or twice or 4 times a month, you might not be doing that now. And so all of those household responsibilities, laundry, parenting and childcare, caregiving, and making sure that you're caring maybe for elderly parents or a sister or brother that you may have that might be disabled. And so starting to look at all of these different things, even sleep. What do you want from a sleep perspective? I've actually recently said, I want to get 7 hours of sleep per night. I need it for my mental and physical health. And so I now use the app on my phone to make sure that whatever time I'm going to bed, it will always change the alarm to 7 hours later. Okay, so I want you to really take a look at all of those different categories that are in that first column, and then think about it. Is there something for you that's not there? Okay, so this is not to be shared with anyone but yourself for the rest of your life. You could immediately start deleting some rows out of here and say, oh, that's not relevant for me at all. Personally, I would say, don't delete the rows, just keep them in there and don't do anything with it for now. Because what you can do, as this is an Excel doc, is you can keep one tab as it is right now as your template. And then click on the bottom of that tab and create, move or copy, create a copy and rename it for March 2021. And then that's the version that you can start filling out and completing as we go through this, and start deleting rows and adding things in based on what matters to you right now. But it's that adding things in that will be really crucial to your happiness, because I am not you. I don't live in your shoes. And so when you look at something like this, you may say, oh, actually, it's something else that's not on this list. So that's what is along the left-hand column. Now, I want to talk a little bit about what you see along the top and how we're going to think about this. So as I had mentioned, that first column is what you want. Or actually, after you have focus area, then you'll see new. And the reason why I put new in there is because many times the things that are not a part of our life today, but that are really important to us, will require us to give it some special love and attention. And that's because, as we'll talk a little bit about later, that's when a lot of fears can come up, where it may be something you want to do, but if it's something new in your life, you're like, oh, that was a dumb idea, or I could never do that, or I don't even know what to take for the first step, or how do I get started? And so when you see something that is important to you, that you want in your life that's new to you, remind yourself you need to be a little A, kinder and gentler to yourself in this process, but B, identify what are some potential fears, and we'll talk about the different categories of fears a little bit later that could come up that could stop you from doing that. And then 3, you'll also need to be more specific about building a plan for yourself around anything that is entirely new that you want to bring into your blue sky life. Okay, the next column that you see there is to start thinking about what you want. And so as we can go through this, what I want you to do right now is to look across that first column of all of those focus areas. Take a look and decide what is the thing that jumps out to you right now as the absolute most important thing that you want to change or that you want to work on. Okay. And as we're going through this, I want you to start filling in the boxes only in that one row. So don't worry about anything else that you see in that column of focus areas. For you, if you said, you know what, I really want a promotion, you'd say, okay, well, that falls into the second row on the list, role, title, or level. And we're going to go across and fill that out as we're doing this. So and I'll just use that promotion example. So you're then in that third column, which is what you want. What do you want for a promotion? What is the thing that you're specifically focusing on? And get granular and detailed around it. So I'll give you an example. There was actually a young woman who used to work with the DPAA who desperately wanted a promotion. And I had a conversation with her to say, well, why do you want this promotion so much? What is it that is important to you? Because I can tell you, as somebody who has had every title from CEO, Chief Business Officer, VP, Director, you name it, it really makes no difference in your life. I will tell you, the only difference is now that I have a CEO in my title, I get a lot more people trying to sell me stuff on LinkedIn. That's about the only thing that having that title specifically has added to my life. So it's not just about a title, it's what's beyond the title. Is it that you want more responsibility, more seniority? Do you want to do something different? Do you want more money that goes along with that? If you're working for a company that has equity, do you want to get restricted stock units that go along with that? So you have equity in the company and a piece of the action. If you're a manager of 2 people, do you want to be able to manage 5 people or 10 people? Do you want a totally different function within the organization? So that's why when I say, what do you want? That's what you want to get clear with. Okay. Because anybody can get a better title by just switching to another job. There's a lot of amazing companies that are all being represented on our call today. You could hop around from one company to another. That's not going to make you happy either. So really, that's what this is about, is identifying what do you want and then being able to articulate it to manifest it. Okay, so now hopefully you've taken a little bit of time thinking about what do you want specific to that thing that's most important to you. Now I want you to think about what's in the next column. What do you want to avoid related to it? Is there anything? Close your eyes for a moment. And I can see many of you, so I see if your eyes are open. Close your eyes and think about what are the possible scenarios of how this could go off the rails in the wrong direction. And again, that's where also sometimes being really specific about what you do want will help with that. So I'll give you an example. Let's say you want a management role and you've been an individual contributor. Let's say you're in a sales function in one of the companies. And so you really want a manager role and you tell them that you're ready to manage, you know that you can make such a difference and you've been expressing yourself as a leader and you're ready to take that next step. But maybe you didn't think about one scenario would be that rather than now you just managing other people and giving up your own individual contributor responsibilities, you are now a player coach, or you are an agile manager, as companies like using now, which basically means player coach, which means you are now managing other people, but you have pretty much the same job responsibilities at the same time. Okay, that may be what you want to avoid. So think about what are all those scenarios of what somebody could say, and then what would sound good to you and what would you want to avoid. Okay, and write that down, add that right into your blue sky blueprint. The next thing that we're going to be focusing on is how you're going to ask for this in your life or pursue it. And again, I'm giving you that example of if you wanted to take the next step in your career or you wanted that promotion. But it could be the same thing if it's sharing household duties with your roommate, your spouse, your partner, your boyfriend or girlfriend, that you need to really take that time to think about how are you going to make that ask? Who is it going to be to? And what would be the words specifically that you would use? And the reason why I feel strongly about taking this moment to think about what are the words that we use is for two reasons. First of all, words matter, and how you position something to show that it is, in many cases, you can position it so that it becomes a win-win, can go a lot farther than if you don't take that time to really think about how do you want to articulate it and position it in the best light so that it can be that value exchange of what they'll get as well as what you'll get. But the other piece of that is when you can write it out, then what I want you to do is to say those words out loud and practice it. Because first of all, the way we write and the way we talk are two entirely different things. But also, once you then say it a few times, you will get past that nervousness of making that ask, and it'll be so much easier when you need to do that in real life. So take a minute or two and think about how you would ask and who you are going to have that conversation with. And again, for some of these things, it may be not necessarily a who, but a where you are going to start. So using the example of if you wanted a board of director seat, it may start with doing some research around, there are different organizations. Think of it as like headhunters for women to serve on advisory boards and boards of directors. So that may be that first step for you of doing that research to find those organizations. But then there will be words, which is you're going to have to get on a phone call or a Zoom conversation with someone and say, I want to join a board of directors where I can leverage my experience in programmatic media or the digital out-of-home space to help a company do ba, ba, ba. Okay, so that's how you want to start thinking about how to get really specific about the words that you're going to use and the ask. Okay, we're going to move on here. So you're staying with that same row. Now we're talking about, I don't know what that means. Now we are talking about what can you share, what can you outsource, or what can you or should you give up, if that even makes sense for whatever you're working for on the row. But I'll give you some examples of how that could. So let's go back to the promotion example. That one may be where I want to give up my freedom or of being an individual contributor, of working whenever I want, because I'm going to now be on everybody else's schedule. Or I'm going to give up working with my favorite client that I've worked with for 5 years because the only opportunity that's available within this organization is on another team or working in a different vertical where I don't have any experience yet. Then if you think about this section on that personal level, so if you went down to home and you, this is one of those areas where it becomes really important. So if you were talking about household responsibilities or parenting duties with your partner, what is it that you need to give up in order to make something that's important to you? Or think about outsourcing as it relates to this. So again, if you want to focus on having more time with your child, you may look at the rest of the list and say, I need to spend less time doing laundry, for example. So laundry is one thing that I want to give up in my life, or I can outsource. You know what? I'm going to do a little bit of research, and it's worth it to pay $50 every other week to outsource my laundry and have the local laundromat wash and fold and bring me back my laundry. And that's going to give me back more time with my child. Okay, so right now, write that down of what is it that you're sharing, outsourcing, or potentially giving up in order to make this thing that's so important to you happen. And now comes a tough question, and we'll come back to this one a little bit more later, but start thinking about it now. Is there anything that you're afraid of in pursuing this? Could be anything from as we've talked about in the past with imposter syndrome, feeling that feeling of you're not worthy of this yet, or you're not ready for it, or you don't like asking for help. It makes you feel really uncomfortable. It could be that you'll have to give up something that's really important to you, and you're scared of what that would mean, even though this other thing may be that much more important. So if there's anything that jumps out to you, put that in there right now, but we're going to come back to this a little bit later. And the last column of how can you resolve, overcome, or address your fear, we will absolutely come back to later on. So you don't need to put that down just yet. So what I want you to think about and give me a little thumbs up, and you could do it either with your real thumb or your reactions on the bottom of the screen. If you have one line that you've worked on so far and you feel pretty good about knowing what's one thing that's really important to you that you want in your life. Do I have some thumbs up here? Okay, good. I'm seeing some thumbs up. That's great. So what we're going to do now is we're going to share. Hopefully all of you who have gotten to know me for the past few years is I like all of us being able to weigh in together. So we are going to do this by using Menti. So the easiest way to do this right now is you can pick up your phone and just open the camera app and hover it over that QR code, and it will open up Menti, and you'll be able to put information in right there. Once you get there, give us a little heart so that we know that you've arrived. If you don't have your phone right near you, you can open up another browser window on your computer, and you're going to go to the address you see here on the screen, menti.com. And if you're joining by phone, for any of you who might be calling in, again, you can just open up Safari or Explorer, whatever you use on your phone, and type in menti.com. That's MENTI.com. M is in Mary, E, N is in Nancy, T is in Thomas, I.com. And once you get to that address, I'm going to say this out loud, you'll put in the code 48 38 49 22. That's again, 48 38 49 22. And again, in case we have anybody who's on the phone or who's away from their computer for a second, I will ask maybe Blake, if you would be kind enough to just put the email or the URL on there and that code, that would be great. But you'll also see it on the next screen as well. So let's see if we have everybody joining us. It looks like we've got about 37 of you who have gotten there so far. So again, you'll want to either just hover over the QR code, or you can type in menti.com, and then this way we can all start sharing together. And one thing that you should all know is that when we do share with Menti, not only is it helping us feel connected and not so alone, but we also use the inputs that you share with us through these surveys or data visualization, which is what it is, in these sessions to help identify what are some of the upcoming programs and workshops that we need to develop. So it looks like we're getting to about 50 of you so far. So I am going to move us to the question of what part of your life is most important for you to focus on for your blue sky blueprint. So we'll give everybody a minute to weigh in here. Looks like right now we've got that work-life integration, really important. And as you're filling that out, I'm going to finish that story that I started with earlier. So when I was deciding then between what those two different jobs that I wanted was, and I had used my blue sky blueprint, but initially I only had the career section that I built for myself around what were the roles and responsibilities I wanted. And it was as I started evaluating those two jobs, I realized, gosh, there's a lot of other things that are really important to me on the work-life integration piece. One of them that was critical to me was that I did not want to have to be in New York City in an office 5 days a week. That was an absolute not starter for me. So I wrote that on my list, along with a few other things that I realized weren't specific to the function of my job, but that were really important to me culturally. And wouldn't you know it, fast forward to, I'm lucky enough that I get 2 offers from 2 amazing companies that probably all of you know. And one of them that I was super excited about, I was planning on saying yes to. But I actually used my blue sky blueprint before I said yes to say, I do want to just make sure there are a few things that are really important to me. And before I accept this job, I just want to talk about it and make sure that none of those would be off the table in working in your company environment. And I went through boom, boom, boom. And then I got to the one that was most important to me, which was not being in an office 5 days a week. And when I said that, the response was like, oh yeah, well, that's not possible. So, well, what do you mean that's not possible? And they said, we have a very office-centric environment. So much so that even if you, and I was in a sales management role, even if you're on a client meeting that's 15 minutes from your house in New Jersey, and it's 4 p.m., and it's an hour to get back to the office, you would be expected to come back into the office, because as management here, it's so important that we're showing everybody that we are here in the office 5 days a week. And so we had multiple conversations. I ended up talking to the chief revenue officer of the company about it. And he said, we want you here so badly that we are willing to make an exception. And that exception is we will let you work from home 1 day a week, every other week on a 3-month basis. And if we feel that it's not successful after 3 months, then we're going to take that away. And that for me was the determining factor why I didn't go to that company. But if I had not taken the time to write out in priority order what was really important to me, I absolutely would have taken that job and then would have gotten there. And in the matter of a week or two would have been like, this is a major mistake. Okay, so it looks like that work-life integration part is most important for all of you. And whatever is important to you, whatever that, as I like to talk about, there's the big rocks in life. Those are those things that many times we really care so much about, and they're so important, but they will never appear magically on your calendar. There will never be a 25th hour that shows up in the day for you to focus on that thing that really matters to you. And whatever line you worked across in your blue sky blueprint, I'm going to say that's a big rock for you. And so based on that, I want to share with us, what is that thing that you're working on in your blue sky blueprint that you want to make sure that you're making more time for? So now again, please weigh in and let's see what are those things that you care about, that you're going to work on in your blue sky blueprint. And as I had mentioned, we're going across one line throughout the course of our time together today. But please know that you can and should do this for yourself on an ongoing basis, but you should not expect that you're going to work on 20 different things at the same time. Start with one big rock. Go to a second one. Go to a third. Maybe go to the thing that you're unhappiest about and see from there. So as many of you may remember from the other workshops that we've done, this is a word cloud, which means that if any of you have input the same exact word or phrase, that will be larger in the word cloud than other things that we see here. So keep in mind that there may be some things that are very similar, like somebody might put in self-care and somebody else might put in taking care of myself. Those may still be smaller, but we may still see some common themes and threads that come up here. So even just looking at the list right now, I'm seeing family is right at the heart of it. Self-care, mental health, health, and exercise, which are all basically the same thing, are also very large within there. Let's see what else we've got here. Personal growth, relationships. Oh, a new hobby. I'm curious what that is. recognition, relationships, meditation. Amazing how that's always on my list. And one of those things that I have not done a good enough job making time for. Okay, well, thank you for sharing what are those things that you need to find time for. And so we are going to focus on how do you start doing this as we're going through here. Now, it's interesting. As I'm looking at this, I'm seeing not a ton of work-related things. So I see company culture, I see recognition, I'm seeing career, organization, maybe that's not even your job. But I think this is really important that we realize this, that it's those things that are so important to who we are as a human being that are the things that we need to make more time for. And as I had mentioned, they are never just going to show up on your calendar. Okay, and so I'm also curious, and Marcy Weisler just put this in the chat as well, curious of how this is changing with COVID. So is it for many of us that we can't be with our family, or our mental health has absolutely suffered, as so many, for all of us are really struggling with the burnout of being home and living on Groundhog's Day for now over a year. So we're all in the same place here. I'm going to stop sharing this, and we are going to go back over to the presentation. So bear with me one second as we get back there, which now, okay, here we go. So as I had mentioned, I like to think of whatever it is that you're focusing on first in your blue sky blueprint as one of those big rocks that you've got to fit into your jar of life. And some of you may have heard this metaphor before. I've even talked about it in one of our previous workshops. But again, the metaphor is, if you think about your life and the 24 hours that we're all gifted with every single day as a jar, what are the priorities of what you would fit into that jar? And so the big rocks are those things that we really care about and matter most in our life. And then you've got your pebbles, which are some smaller things that are important, but not what is going to be put on your headstone when your time is up. And then there's the sand. The sand is what basically the minutia in life, the things that just fill up all of our time. And as you all know, if you were to fill up this jar and put the sand in first, the minutia, and then the pebbles, and then try and get your big rocks in there, it's not physically possible to do it. But if you put the big rocks in first, and then the pebbles, and then the sand will find a way to fill in the gaps that's there. And so I want us to think about this for a moment of what are those big rocks that matter to you? What are those things that are somewhat important, but you tend to prioritize, but they're not the most important thing? And what is the sand? What are those things that take up the majority of your time that it is not actually making you happy or effective or successful in any way? And so then we're going to start thinking about what can we do around each one. So close your eyes again a second, and I can see you. Okay, your eyes are closed. Is there... We've already focused on one thing that's important for you for your blue sky blueprint. What are those other big rocks that, again, if you imagined, and it's hard to think about this, but if it was your dying day and you had to say, I am so fulfilled with my life because I've spent my life doing, achieving, creating a life with, loving, supporting X, Y, Z, what are those things that for you personally are so incredibly important? And think about, are you putting those things in your jar first? Is that what's filling up your time? And look, the reality is we all, I don't know about you, I did not inherit $100 million. I am, in fact, the primary breadwinner in my family. And so as much as I would love to spend all day, every day with my children, by the way, I have 2 teenage boys, so they would throw up at that idea. But as much as I would now love to do that, I can't do that. I have to pay bills. And so again, I don't want you to feel like you can be unrealistic if you're just going to spend all of your time with your, your loved one and your best friends and painting sunsets on the beach. But actually think about what are those things that are important to you. Okay. Now, what we're going to do is in your blue sky blueprint, write down, even if it's not within the columns that you see there, just write down what are the other most important things that you want to find time for. And you don't have to share this out with anyone. This is for you and all about you. Okay. And that's the other nice thing to keep in mind with Menti is that it's anonymous. So there's no way to track back to what you shared. So you can always feel honest when we do that. But think about, find the 3 to 5 things max that's most important for you to find time for every single week. It could be, again, not only the big stuff like family, but it could be exercise. It could be making your dream job a reality at some point in the future. So I'll give you an example. That may mean that someday you want to retire from the digital out of home industry and you want to do something in the wine industry. Well, it may mean that you're not quitting your job at Talon today and then going to work as a wine pourer, as a wine distributor tomorrow. It may mean that you say, oh, you know what? I want to be on this path in 5 or 10 years. And so maybe I'm going to sign up for a class around introduction to wines, right? So it's about thinking about what's important to you. Now, when you're thinking about what's important, I want you all to think about a Lego set. So, and boy, do I wish they had these awesome Lego sets like this when I was a kid. Ours were really ugly. But when you buy a Lego set, if anybody here has ever completed one themselves as an individual or a parent, it does not come out of the box looking like this, right? You don't just immediately get the perfect environment set up for you on day one. When you open up that Lego set, you have to build it brick by brick. And so when you think about whatever that is that's really important to you, that is not exactly where you want it to be today, whether it's career, work-life integration, or for you personally, think about how do you start working towards it brick by brick. And a brick could mean it's a commitment of 5 or 10 minutes. Okay, so again, let's say this is on the personal front and family was very important to you. Let's say that family means a 10-minute call to your mom on a daily basis, or 10 minutes that you take out of the middle of your workday while you're working from home and you sit down and have lunch with your kids, or you have playtime where you're getting on the floor and maybe even building a Lego set for 10 minutes, as opposed to thinking about how you're going to completely transform your life. Because what happens for most of us is whatever that thing is that you want to work on so much, we start telling us this story of, well, one day when I have the big chunk of time, then that's when I'm going to work on that. Okay. So one day when I have a much bigger chunk of time, I am going to organize my life, or I'm going to organize my office, or I am going to plan that vacation for my family, as opposed to saying, I'm just going to make 10 minutes right now. And so whatever that thing is important to you right now, I want you to take out your phone. You're allowed to look at it and open your calendar and make a recurring calendar appointment for yourself for whatever that thing is that's important to you for 10 minutes. And I don't care where you put it on your calendar. You can put it in the morning, like Enza, you can put it in the evenings, or you can put it smack dab in the middle of your day so that you make sure that there is 10 minutes for you and something that is important and that you'll get to it. And you can move it around every week, but make that calendar appointment and then make it a recurring calendar appointment with no expiration date. And make that commitment to yourself that you're going to start working on that one thing to start with. And certainly, if you find that there's a day where you can allocate a half an hour, maybe you even start time blocking. If it's something on a personal front that's really important to you, maybe on the weekend, now you time block 30 minutes or 1 hour until that gets completed. And then that's it. They just become calendar appointments that will be built into your calendar. The other thing that you might want to do for that thing that's most important to you is think about, is there somebody who can be an accountability partner for you? So regardless of whether it's self-care and taking care of yourself, if you have a friend who you know feels the same way, and you can share this with your friends. Hey, I worked on this blue sky blueprint. Use this for yourself. Share it. Just because you're here today and this is through the DPAA, I want you to share this with other women and men in your life if it's going to help them. And so you can share it and say, what's your most important thing? Is self-care at the top of your list? Because it is for me. So let's make a weekly accountability check-in with each other, where if I had meditation on that list, I am going to make a commitment, and you say it out loud. If I'm going to meditate for 3 minutes a day, and I'm going to check in with you to see if your self-care commitment was to take a bath a week, I'm going to check in to see if you're doing that. And then when you have that accountability check-in with someone who you know and love and now are excited to also fit into your life, you can ask each other to be honest. And if you've failed of making any progress along that thing that's really important to you, well, if you failed, that's okay. You don't need to lie to anybody. But that accountability partner, you could share with them, why couldn't you make time for 3 minutes to when your meditation reminder went off in your calendar? Why did you shut things down for 3 whopping minutes to do it? And then they may be able to help you solve for and figure out, is there another way that you can achieve what's important to you? Next, I want you to think about the pebbles or the stones there that are those things that are important and take up our time, but they're not the most important things. So think about of where you spend a lot of your time that is important to you. Are there ways that you can maximize the impact of those things that you're doing? And I'll give you an example of what I mean about this. So if exercise is important to you and you're doing it, and you find that you can go for a walk every day, or you can go for a run every day, but that big rock that was missing for you was your relationships or spending time with family, well, is there a way you can now invite one of your close friends or family to go for a walk with you or go for that run with you? So now you can start combining those things that you know that you are already going to do and finding a way to bring it in. So for example, I love Zumba. I'll do it anywhere and anytime that I can. But I also miss my coworker and friend Liz, who's on this call. So this is my reminder for me to say, well, why don't I invite Liz to come to Zumba with me every weekend? I know she likes Zumba too, but she does it in her world and I do it in mine. That's a way, one example of how you can make those mid-level priorities, things that are important to you, to start to pull in some of those big rocks that are important to you. Another example of that, again, I'll stay with the exercise front, could be if exercise is important, but you want to spend more time with your family or children, is you could say, okay, well, you know what? Time is limited. And so maybe I'm going to play basketball with my kids, or I'm going to get down on the floor if I have really little ones, and I'm going to pretend that I'm a crazy animal and I'm going to chase them all around the house on my hands and knees. And guess what? You're going to get a pretty awesome workout when you do that. I even used to, when my kids were really little, I'd play hide and seek with them. And I would count to 20 every time. And at the time, I felt I did not have time to fit exercise into my life. So we play hide and seek. And as I counted to 20, I would do 20 push-ups the first round. Next time I'd be 20 squats. The next time, 20 push-ups. And it made an amazing difference for me. So find those ways to join them together. And then finally, let's talk about the sand, that low priority stuff that we all need to minimize in our life. Okay, so Think of it, for you, it might be anything from social media. So you may spend, you may get lost down the rabbit hole of, you're like, oh, I just want to check. Oh, I see that notification. Let me check and see what happened. And next thing you know, you're like, how is it 1 o'clock in the morning? It was 11 o'clock last time I checked. It could be streaming and binge watching your favorite shows, or maybe even non-favorite shows, that they're not things that you look forward to and you love and you get a lot out of, but you just get into this habit of watching the next one and watching the next one and watching the next one. It could be something like the news. So you might say, well, it's important for me to stay abreast of what's happening in the world. And so at multiple times throughout the day, you're checking the news. Whatever it is for you, and I will assume for all of us, it's email, right? We all spend way too much time in email. And I'll also say in this industry, it's probably a lot of status check-in Zoom calls where there is not a very clear agenda of exactly what are the desired outcomes from that meeting that you're having. What are the objectives of exactly why you're meeting? And what are the roles and responsibilities of what anybody needs for you to meet those desired outcomes from the meeting? If you start to put that into practice and see, we don't need a half an hour check-in. In fact, we need a 5-minute check-in, or maybe we don't need any check-in. We could just all be thoughtful on our own and either use email or Slack to share that information. You've just saved yourself over the course of a week, and multiply that by multiple status calls, a lot of time. So think about, what are those things? And now you're going to use time blocking in a different way. So what I want you to think about, is there a specific time you could allow yourself to check in on those things that are the time wasters for you? So again, using social media as an example. If you're the kind of person that every time you see a notification come up, you're like, oh, one more. Oh, who is it? Okay. Oh, 2 more. Oh, okay. Who is it? And then you check. I want you to get away from that. First off, shut off the notifications for social media, if that's your case, and set a date with yourself and a time and a recurring calendar appointment at whatever time makes most sense for you. Maybe you're somebody that you love it so much that you're like, I have to find time in the morning and in the evening. And so you say, okay, I'm going to set 5 minutes for myself in the morning, and you time block that in, and 10 minutes for myself in the evening. And then when you open up Facebook or Instagram or what's that new one? I constantly get notifications that I just shut off, where you're all talking. I forget the new one that everybody gets invited to. Whatever it is, shut off the notifications. And when you go on Instagram or whatever that thing is for you, set the timer on your phone for 5 minutes or 10 minutes or however much time. Now, granted, you're only responsible for yourself. So if you're looking at Instagram and you're so happy and you're getting so much out of it after the 5-minute timer goes off, set another 2-minute timer. But don't fall into that trap of then this takes up all this time and then you don't have time for those things that are important to you. Because for goodness sakes, how many of you said self-care was something you wanted, but I can assure you, you have not set aside 5 or 10 minutes for self-care on your calendar every day. Okay, so that's how we're going to handle that quicksand of life. And now what I want you to think about is, what's that quicksand or things that take up your time? And I think it was Irina, you had mentioned this during your awesome section up front about learning to say no. Okay. This is one of those areas in life where we need to practice and get comfortable with the language we can use and how do we say no to things. Because the more successful you get, the more demands there are for your time, the more needed you are. And so you're going to need to be able to say no. And that's what I want you to do, is to think about preparing your script of what that would sound like for the future. So again, close your eyes, everybody. Think about, what is that question that you've gotten before? Somebody asked you to do something that you really didn't want to do and really was not on your priority list at all, but you said yes to it. Okay, so think about that And then what we want to do is think about how can you start channeling what some of those go-to no's can be for you in the future. So the first one, I'll give you an example of how you can say no the next time you get asked, is to offer to be a future resource. Okay, so future resource is one way. Sounds something like, oh, thank you so much for thinking of me right now, but my plate is full. But if you need help in the future, please come back to me again. Just, this is not the time for me right now. Okay, so you're not saying an absolute no forever, but you can be a future resource for them. Okay, again, here's another choice for you of how you're flattered, but committed. I'm so flattered that you thought of me for this project, but I am fully committed right now based on my work priorities that I have, or the priorities that I've set myself for this year. Let's talk a little bit as we get to the back half of the year or next quarter to see if I might have some more availability. So this is another variation on think of me in the future, but you're being very clear of, I really appreciate it. I'm so flattered and honored that you think of me, but right now I'm not going to be able to help you. Okay. Another solution to say no is to broker an introduction. So I'd love to help, but I'm fully committed right now. However, I know somebody else who might be a great resource for you. And really think about it. Who could be helpful for this person? Would you like me to make an introduction for you? Okay, and I'll give you an example. This is for those of you with kids, and certainly as those kids get into school, what will happen is when you are successful at work, as all of you are, that you're in this amazing industry, people will say, oh, she'd be great to be on the PTA. We need a treasurer, we need a secretary, we need a president of the PTA. And you know, Irina is president of her company. So she could totally be president of the PTA. She would know how to do that. And so now you're going to get asked to be president of the PTA. Well, that, if that's one of Irina's big rocks, she can absolutely say yes to it and find a way to fit it into her life. But if it's not, she can think about how does she let them know she's so flattered, or she can think about, is there a woman that she knows of who's brilliant and has been successful and maybe had a great career, but has decided to take time out of her career to either slow down, or she's working part-time, or she's working on a consulting basis, or she's just a full-time stay-at-home mom. And that would be the perfect example where Irina could say, I'm so flattered that you thought of me. I'm overcommitted right now. However, Nicolette is, she's amazing, and she's so organized, and she might be somebody who's great for this. Would you want me to talk to her and make an introduction? Okay, so now you've just taken it off your plate, and hopefully Irina will have a conversation with Nicolette beforehand to say, hey, Nicolette, here's a way you could say no if you want to say no to this too. Because just because you're a stay-at-home mom or working part-time doesn't mean you want to be president of the PTA. Okay, so we're going to talk about another way, which is offering a compromise. So I'd love to lead this, but my schedule's full right now. However, is there another role that I could play? Could I be an advisor? Could I play a supporting role that would still be of some value for you? Okay, I just went through this myself. I'm one of the many ways that I volunteer my time is I was on the enrichment committee of Impact 100 Jersey Coast. If you don't know about Impact 100, all of you write it down right now. Impact 100 is an amazing philanthropic organization where women all commit money, $1,000 a year, and then all of that money gets pooled for critical nonprofit in your community, like small community of where that money needs to get spent to fund a nonprofit that will make a major difference in your community. And all the women decide how those funds are used. They help the nonprofits with writing grant requests. It's amazing. But I was on the enrichment committee. There was a lot of time that I was spending on it. And quite frankly, I was not getting anything back from it. And it wasn't making me feel more fulfilled. And it also was not using my unique gifts and talents. So I finally had a conversation with them and said, I'm so honored that you want me to be a part of the enrichment committee. However, I don't think this is the best use of my talent and skills or time. However, if you need a moderator for an upcoming event or a host for something, I'd love to help with that. And they were like, oh my goodness, we can't believe that. We need somebody for an upcoming event. And so it was a way to not say no completely, but find a better way to get to a yes. That's a win-win for both of us. Okay, so now come back to your blue sky blueprint and think about, take a fresh look at it. Is there something else that jumps out to you of something that might have been the sand that you spend way too much time on, or that you need to think differently about of how you're going to deal with it? Okay, so look down that list. Again, sometimes it comes into the home and use section that you could even just put a highlight on that row to say, you know what, this is something I need to take time over the course of the next week or two or month and really start to map out a very specific plan of how I'm going to change this for myself. Okay, so that's how I want you to think about it. And finally, the last thing that we're going to touch on are your fears and some of the fears that may get into your way. So there are actually, the reason why I think it's important to understand this is as you get to those big rocks, the things that you really care about, that you need to start working on, that you haven't started, this is where fear can impede you. So, and Blake, if you could just mute everyone for us, that'd be awesome. Thank you. So there's a few different categories of fears. So one type of fear is a fear called extinction. So this is things like death and the dark and flying and heights and fatal diseases. I don't think that's probably going to be your fear. Then there's mutilation. We're still getting some background noise. If everybody could just put yourself on mute. Okay, there we go. So there's mutilation and body invasion. I'm not talking about aliens coming to take over your body, but in fact, what that fear category is things like germs, crowds, needles, surgical procedures. Just so you know, this is a kind of fear. This is probably very related to what you're dealing with from a COVID perspective right now, and why we all went out and bought all that toilet paper last year, and maybe why you're questioning whether or not you're going to get a vaccine. Please get a vaccine. Loss of autonomy, fear of commitment, poverty, illness, aging, work-related helplessness. Okay, so these are some fears that absolutely may come into especially the career aspects. And this one is the one that, especially for us women, tends to really rear its ugly head. And that's separation, abandonment, or rejection. And it's everything from the end of a relationship to certainly when you think about from a work perspective, this is many times why we don't share our creative ideas. This is why we don't ask for the promotion when we really want it, or we don't ask the client for them to 10x their spend, even though they already told you that you had the best results for them based on anybody else that they worked with. Okay, it's that fear of being rejected that goes along with that. And finally, that last category of fear that will absolutely play into some of the things that will be on your blue sky blueprint is fear of failure, criticism, bullying, making mistakes, and certainly public speaking, which for some of you, if it's about taking a step up, might start to manifest itself. And so understanding what these different types of fears are means that you can recognize it. And when you can recognize it, you can start to find a solution rather than just having that weird feeling of like, oh, I don't know if I can do this. Next time you think about why aren't you doing this, think about, what kind of fear might that be? I know it's just a type of fear, and every type of fear, there is a way to get over it. And so that's what I'm going to focus on. And there's actually this feararchy, like a hierarchy of fears, where the more successful you are, the higher up that fear is going to be of ego death, which is that fear of humiliation that we just talked about at the last one. And if you want to learn more about this, just research Carl Albrecht, who is the author of everything around the feararchy. But we've also talked in the past about Maslow's hierarchy of needs and how this is something that, especially during COVID, it can become really hard as you fall down that list of needs and are worried about things like safety and your health. And it's harder to then focus on being the most that you can be. And what's interesting to me is just how aligned these two are, right? Our needs and our fears tend to be most aligned. So it's when you are trying to do something that is your most creative self, the thing that's going to impact the world and your life the most, is when you're going to get to that ego death or humiliation fear the most. And so once you know that this is how we all operate as human beings, again, then you have a choice of how you're going to deal with it. And so even take a moment for that one thing that was most important to you. Go back to your blue sky blueprint right now and look towards the right-hand side of the columns. And is there something that you could say, which could be a fear, that may hold you back from doing something about it? Okay. What could that be? Can you bucket it or put it into a category? Because when you do, then you realize it's just information that you have the power to do what you want with. Okay. And so think of it like the news. Okay. We all have that ability that when there's news stories that might scare us, or think of just how political everything was over the course of the last 6 months, year of our life. When there's something in the news, you can acknowledge it and say like, okay, well, that is a piece of information. Then you can say, is this valid? So with your own fear, is this something that's real? Like, will somebody definitely say, no, you're not good enough? Or is that just what you're telling yourself in your head? And then you have that choice of valuing it and say, okay, no, I think that's really going to happen, or disregarding it completely. And if it is a valid fear that you have, so it means like, yes, there is a likelihood that if you ask for a promotion, that they'll fire you, or whatever it might be, you could ask yourself these 3 questions. And these 3 questions have gotten me through so many difficult scenarios in my life where I was not ready to pull the trigger and I would just get stuck. Those 3 questions: what's the worst thing that can happen? What's the best thing that can happen? And what is most likely to happen? Okay. If the worst thing that can happen is something that you're okay with, well, then definitely get going this instant. Like, what's stopping you? But even if it's what's likely to happen is something that you are totally fine with, then think about, are there ways to proactively get ahead of or factor in the worst thing that could happen, so that will no longer be able to happen, or you'll take it off the table? For those of you who have experience with negotiating and sales, think of this for your own life as objection handling. So what is the worst thing that somebody could say in response? And what are the different ways that you are going to respond to that so that you get ahead of it? And the best negotiators and salespeople, when it comes to objection handling, will proactively address that objection before it ever even surfaces, so it gets taken off the table and never becomes a blocker. Okay, so to finish us off, what we are going to wrap it up with is creating your own confidence catalog, so that as you're making those 10-minute commitments to yourself and moving your mission forward, you can start to catalog those achievements and know that you are making progress. So what you've gotten in one of those handouts was a deep dive confidence catalog that you could create for yourself. And that will take you through this whole process of thinking about on your whole life, what are those things you're most proud of? And then getting closer and closer and closer in time. But I want you to think about, what are those work achievements that you're really proud of, that you've done maybe in the last 2 years, or those last 2 months, or are there things even in the last 2 weeks that you're proud of? And sometimes it feels so great to own this. So if you can right now, and I'd advise you all to do it, just one thing that you're proud of, to celebrate the amazing women that we have as part of the DPAA we do. Put one thing you are proud of, work related, in the chat right now. Own it. What is that one thing that you've done? I'm going to put in there, just imagine I'm typing this in, but I'm not going to get distracted. I am proud of the fact that I did this workshop, and this makes me happy. But I will tell you, the thing I'm most proud of in the last 2 weeks is that I shared for International Women's Day a story about why I am so passionate about helping advance women at work. It's on the Wet Cement website. You can see it in the Fearless in 5 section. It's also on LinkedIn as an article. And it was the first time that I really took stock of all those little experiences that led up of where I was held back or made to feel less than as a woman. And that realization that the sum of all those experiences is why I don't want that to ever happen to the next generation. I want to save every other woman from having to ever feel those things. But to be honest, to share that was very scary because I was so angry with myself that I let a lot of this happen to me. So I felt so embarrassed and ashamed of the fact that I would let myself be treated like that. And I finally said, sharing this so it will help open other people's eyes is more important than me feeling embarrassed or ashamed. And so I'm just going to do it. I'm just going to put it out there. And so that's something that's not necessarily work related, but it's something I did where I was vulnerable and I took a risk and I'm proud of it. So think about it. Are there things you were doing on a weekly, monthly basis? And with it being International Women's Day and Women's History Month, what could you do this month that you're going to be really proud of that's going to put your mission forward? And then what you want to do is on an every week basis, you want to just take, again, a little bit of time out of your week to schedule an appointment with yourself. 5 minutes. That's all you need to do to look back on your week and say, what did I do that I'm proud of this week? And you add it into this ongoing list, which is your confidence catalog. And if you look back on the week and there's nothing that you're proud of, well, that is the perfect reminder that you need to plan better for next week. That is your visualize right there. Close your eyes and say, damn it, I let the sand fill up the jar. And this week, I'm going to make sure I'm time blocking more time. So the big rocks are going to fill up my week. And then all the other stuff will end up filling up your calendar. And then if you can, on a monthly basis, even a quarterly basis, stop and take a look at all those things that you've added to your confidence catalog. And it is going to give you a boost of confidence like nobody's business. But you can also do that confidence catalog specifically for one of those things that you're working on for your blue sky blueprint. So if for you, it was that you wanted to, self-care was really important to you, make a little self-care confidence catalog where just on a weekly basis, you just catalog and capture, did you take a bath this week? Did you go to a yoga class? Did you meditate? And it might also be that reminder you could add in there of how did it make you feel when you did that? So the next time when you're way too busy to do it, you can look back at that and be like, oh, but this made me feel so inspired or happy or fulfilled, or I actually got the most creative I've ever been in my life when I did that. And so I need to make time for that and do that work. I say you can also add this to another place where with time you can organize it, because when you think about what that blue sky blueprint will look like a year from now, 5 years from now, you may be focused on an entirely new list of missions you want to work on, and being able to look back and see what it is that you're really good at and what you've done and what you're proud of can help you think about where should I go in the future. And then from a work perspective, you can also then start to think about, are there ways that you can put KPIs or success metrics into the things that you're doing that you're proud of? So are you growing revenue year over year? Are you reducing employee turnover? Whatever it is, based on what your role is, think about how can you actually measure this impact. And then the final piece that I strongly recommend is to make a commitment to yourself that you are going to share this with a few people in your life that you trust and respect, and let them know that this is something you're working on for yourself, and that you'll share with them what are those big things that you're proud of when you look back on, again, from childhood up to where you are in your career now. But then you can ask them after you go through that exercise of, are there things that you're missing? that they see in you. I did this exercise one time with a team in a company, and the leader of the team joined in and she was doing it. And she shared with her team the things she was most proud of that she's accomplished over the last 5 years, is how we're doing it. And her team turned to her and they were like, are you kidding me? The greatest thing that you do is X, Y, and Z. But she didn't realize it, because to her, that's just so core to who she is. And so natural to, like, she had the most positive culture where everybody felt like really empowered. And she didn't see that as an achievement. She just thought that's what everybody did. So that's part of why getting feedback from others can really help you identify what your superpowers are. Because when it's really a superpower, many times you can't even see it in yourself. It's just natural to who you are. So with that, I hope all of you are walking away from today of knowing that you can use this blueprint and create new tabs over time so that you can use it to help inform decisions you make and how you're spending your time. I hope you constantly use this technique of time blocking to fill your calendar with your top priorities and making sure whether they're career related or you related. I also hope that you'll take that time to practice saying no. Think of all the different ways you can say it, and then what feels genuine and authentic to you that you would realize, okay, this is not putting the other person off in any way. When you start to feel like you're holding yourself back for any reason, identify and acknowledge what those fears are and work right through them. And finally, make that commitment to yourself for that 5-minute weekly confidence catalog so that you can capture all the things that you're doing that are great and give yourself credit for it. And as for those of you who have joined us before, we have additional material that's available on the Wet Cement website. You can find that here at wet-cement.com. And then you'll see in the top nav bar for exclusive material. And if you use the passcode FEARLESS, you'll be able to access all of that. And of course, we do a lot more at Wet Cement and Advanced Women at Work, our gender equality practice. So of course, we'd love to help any of your organizations. And right now, this is a little trick that you can use if you haven't done it before. In LinkedIn, you can download and save as a photo your own QR code. So if you haven't done that yet, make sure that you do that. So it's an easy way for you to connect with other folks and network. I know that we've had workshops before on networking, but where we shared this secret, but if you missed that, create that QR code. And if any of you want to connect with me, this is an easy way to do it. Again, just open your phone and then you can go from there. And so with that, I want to thank Enza and of course, Irina and the DPAA team, and we'd love to open this up for questions. So if you have a question, put it into the chat. Irina and Enza, while we start to see if any of those questions arise, any thoughts or ahas for you coming out of the session today?
I always have an aha moment with you, Jen. Yeah, I think, what really resonates with me is the self-reflection bit, right? It's, really know where you stand, right? And don't be afraid to do that soul searching. And, it's not so much about, just working with yourself, but, it does take a village, right? So you should absolutely make sure that you're surrounded by people who have really great insights into bringing out the best in you, right? So that to me really does resonate, and it's helped me throughout my journey in this crazy industry and trying to figure out career moves. Listen, life isn't easy, right? And it's not meant to be easy. There are a lot of hurdles, and these hurdles are not meant to be you're not meant to go through them alone, right? This is why we're all here. This is why we have, entities like the DPAA. This is why we have the We Do Advisory Board. And it's not so much of a soapbox, but it's really a great resource, right? So resources are key in supporting everything that you should be doing in your career and, professionally and personally. So that's just something, there's a lot, obviously. I feel like these are excellent tools, but to me, I think knee-jerk reaction is more of that right now.
And Irina, I'll share on that note. Sometimes you can't even know what the way is out, or how you can outsource, or who you can ask for help from. And when you get into that spot, that's where I want you to remind yourself to talk to those people in your life that you know and care, because they may be able to find a solution for you. And I'll give an example. When I had little babies and I felt like I couldn't do it at all and I was about to completely lose it, I talked to my mom and I was just like, I can't do this anymore. Like, I don't even know what to do. And she said, oh, well, why don't you hire a mother's helper? It's like, a mother's helper? That doesn't even exist. What are you talking about? Like, this is not, I'm not at a summer camp or at a beach club. I'm in my life. She's like, well, you could, why can't you take that concept and like have a mother's helper, hire somebody who's great with kids, who comes to your house in the morning, because it was like the morning routine was what was driving me nuts. Like, comes to your house in the morning, helps with the kids, gets them breakfast, gets them off to preschool or wherever they were at the time, and you'll be there, but it like takes all the stress and pressure off of you. And hey, maybe while they're there, they can even do like a load of laundry. And I did it. I put ads out on like teaching, like Glassdoor or whatever, where people were like Craigslist looking for teaching jobs. And I said, for any out of work teachers, please, like, we're interested in hiring somebody. And I hired the most amazing women for about 5 years that would do exactly that. They'd come from like 7 a.m. till 11 a.m. And so for those of you who are moms on here who might be a little overwhelmed, that's the solution. But I never would have thought of that on my own.
Wow.
So talk to a friend.
Totally.
Well, and I think it goes back to what I was saying earlier. When I made the switch into out of home, it didn't come to me naturally. That was because I reached out to my network of women that were dealing with similar situations, and having those conversations with them and being open about what I was dealing with led to somebody saying, you know what, why don't you try this? I think you might really like it. Your strategy experience is really going to help out of home. Your background is really going to help move the industry forward. And that opportunity came because I was willing to discuss it with a network of people. So to your point, Jen, we have to support each other and be available to each other as mentors, and we can work through almost anything when we do it together. So I think that that's just a point that resonates with me. It's always resonated with me, is that mentoring piece of it is really critical. And the other piece is about the calendar. That's actually something, when I talk about those slots that I have my focus, I have those as recurring appointments on my calendar. It is so important. We all work like crazy hours. I don't know about the rest of you, but if it doesn't exist on my calendar, it doesn't exist at all. So making sure that you are slotting things on there is really important. Even your own time, even for your shopping trips or your meditation periods, but putting them in there on your calendar really just gives it's again that permission that I was talking about earlier. It's giving you permission to take that time for yourself. It's there. You've slotted it for yourself. So I think that that's really important.